Hi everyone, thank you for coming. We're just gonna get started because we've been talking for a while now. Okay, could you just tell us about how you first got into the music industry?
Well, I was very fortunate. My older brother was really into music, and fortunately for me, he was very well. I'm not sure he was very okay with it, but he allowed me to go out with him and his friends, which gave me a really important access to a really important friendship group of his, which were, these guys were really into music and going to shows and going to club nights and what have you. And I grew up in North London and the suburbs in Enfield, and like most suburbs, big music traditions and stuff, and going out weekends and stuff. So music was a really important part of our lives, but really on the social side of things. And this was coming into the late 80s, so it was when all of a sudden then what was like the soul scene, which it was the mid 80s and stuff. There's the music we were all listening to and what have you then, and became the sort of start of the rave scene, which so 1988. My brother kind of got into. They were going into those like raves and stuff. So I would be 15, 16 probably, then begging to go, and being a bit too young to go as well. And was fortunate that I got to go to a couple, and it kind of blew my mind really. So from that, I wanted to be part of it. What did that mean? Wanted to be a DJ. My brother's friend became a DJ in that scene, and I wanted to do what he did. And he was making music, and I wanted to make music, so I wanted to do that as well, and just be a part of it. And then, like most music executives of this, most of us are failed musicians or really bad DJs, and couldn't really kind of make it on that side. So you kind of stay involved on the other side of it. But I love the business part of it as well. And so, almost instantaneously, I wanted to put shows on, put parties on. So I was still at school. So it was 1989, and a friend of mine, we rented Palmer's Green Athletic Club, okay, which I don't know if it still exists. And my brother's friend, or my friend as well, DJ'd, and I sold the tickets at school. We printed them up. My friend's dad had printers, handwritten by the way, flyers, and I think it was £3 a ticket. Sold them all out of school, and that was the first show we ever did. And I still remember this day. 1 o'clock in the morning, where it was back at my mum's house, on the kitchen table, counting out, I think £250 or something like that, all in coins, no notes, and thinking that was it. We were like rich. And I did that a couple of times after that. We did a couple more parties. And I was just kind of hooked at that point of wanting to be part of the music industry. Not in an obsessive bit, but I just felt this is what I want to do. I want to, I love, this is great. I enjoy what I'm doing. And, I felt like I understood it, which obviously I didn't. And then I went to university in Liverpool, and very soon, and this was like the 1990s, so the explosion, if you like, of what had come out of the rave scene and going into clubs at that point. And there was a number of clubs in the north of England, Hacienda being one of them. I'm sure you guys are not too young, hopefully, to be able to Google that. That was like a real pivotal moment in British music culture. And that club was hugely inspirational to a number of people, musicians and people who went to work in the music industry. And we used to go there. It was in Manchester. We used to drive over from Liverpool or get the train over to go there. And it was so many different clubs and different record companies and different artists all came out of that environment. And one that came out of that as well was a club called Cream, which I'd met to this day, one of my best friends, a guy called James Barton, and I met him in an independent record store in Liverpool in 1990, and this is where we used to go hang out, because everybody was buying vinyl then. We'd go in and what the best tunes of that week, we would try and claw together £10 and maybe buy one or whatever it would be, or just be in there, because that's where all the DJs went. And back in the DJs used to go in behind the counter and we listen to the vinyl, and it'd be a hang, everybody would. It was like a cultural place where, everybody wanted to hang out on a Saturday afternoon. And I met him there, and he was a DJ in Liverpool at that time. And there were some great clubs. I mean, to this day, a club called Quadrant Park, scary as hell, I think, when I look back on it, but incredible. The best atmosphere, probably to this day, of any club night I've ever been in was the Quadrant Park in 1990. Just insane. And then from that, James was doing other clubs. And then in 1992, he started a club called Cream in a very dilapidated area of Liverpool, in the centre of town, in old warehouses. That's what they were. They were old warehouses, and I started working with him. That's what it was. And there was, another guy who worked with us called Darren Hughes, who started it with James. And Cream just, it was 400 people, I think, the first night. And it all started there. And that's really how my career progressed from there. So I was still studying at that point. And then I graduated in 94, and I went back to Enfield, and I was painting garage doors for the council. That was my summer job. It was the only job I could get. And I got a call to come, do you want to come back? Come on. And so I went back up there, and so that's 30 years ago. So 30 years ago to this, almost, to this summer, was when I went back in. And at that point, Cream just then exploded. It was, a cultural phenomenon really of its time. And, students going to Liverpool because of Cream, which I still find incredible really when we look back on it. And that I work with Jay, we still work on various bits together now, but it's, 11 years we worked together. And that started Creamfields, which still goes to this day. And it was my first proper job, and my first proper job in the music industry.
When did AEG come into the picture?
Well, I left Cream in 2004, and I was, I'd been running Creamfields at that point, and really got a passion for festivals, major events. I really, we did our first one in 1998. We did it as a partnership with a company called Me Fiddler, which is now Live Nation, part of Live Nation, rather, Festival Republic. And it was the first Creamfields event that we did, and it was where it's down in Hampshire, and where Boomtown is. I'm not sure if you guys know Boomtown, the festival down there, same site. But we didn't really do as much on that. We were kind of like the club guys. We booked the DJs and we did some of the marketing, etc. But they ran all of it. But I was fascinated by it, and to see an event of that scale and building the infrastructure around it. And so we did the following year. The partnership didn't work out after the first year, and so we decided to do it ourselves. I mean, James's call said, let's just do it ourselves, but let's do it in Liverpool. So we did the first one. The next one in 1999, we actually did it with funded it ourselves, which is almost unheard of now, really. We talked before about how much harder it is, I think, for young people now to do what we did 30 years ago. The barriers, especially the financial ones, and to entry into any of this industry now is just so high. And the cost of failure is just so high as well. Whereas when we started Cream, it was, okay, we're in this warehouse, it's 400 people, wow, it's got bigger, we've got people waiting to get in, let's just knock all whole. I mean, I don't mean we did it on the night, it was actually properly done, but let's rent the warehouse next door. And now we've gone from 1 room to 2 rooms. And then it gets bigger again, and let's get the warehouse next to that, and let's knock another hole in it. And it goes to 3 rooms and 4 rooms, and it ends up being four major rooms and stuff. And it's very hard to do that now. And it's very cheap to live, very cheap to operate. We weren't chasing money at that point either. It was just because we loved doing it. And I think that's a very different situation to what young people face now coming into the industry. But when we started doing the major festival ourselves, it was a real shift change for me in my career in terms of taking on something of that size. And I remember it really clearly still now. We did it at the old Liverpool airfield, which is developed now, but at the time it's like the famous picture where the Beatles come back from conquering in America, and they get off the plane, and it's that piece of land where the airfield was, and we did it there. And I remember walking around about an hour before the doors opened, and we had all of these huge tents and the big infrastructure pieces you see. And I remember this like, wow, we did this. I don't know how we pulled it together, but we did it. And sort of sense of achievement. And then all of a sudden 35,000 people arrived, and it was the most terrifying day of the rest of my life, at that point, because then the difficulty of managing that large number of people and everything that goes with that. So it was a huge learning curve. But we did that until I left in 2004, and because I'd been asked to run some other shows at that point, I really wanted to take on some new challenges. So I still ran Creamfields, but through my new company, and then took on other festivals, which was Festival and Camp Festival. I did lots of work with Fatboy Slim, which led me to do a festival called Rock Ness in Scotland. And then I sold half of that to AEG, which is where that new journey started.
What was the reason behind selling Cream to Live Nation?
Well, I'd left by then,
Okay.
so you'd have to ask James about that. But I think it's been a great success. I think Scott Barton, who runs that, CEO of that, Scott's worked with me when I was running Cream. I think they've gone on to successes which I would have never thought were possible 20 years ago, which is to their credit, to his credit and his team. And I think the fit with Live Nation obviously has worked very, very well for them. When you're growing a business, you need access to capital, you need access to any number of things to actually to expand and grow out. And obviously they now operate on a much wider international footprint than we did back in the day. And they execute it unbelievably well. I think Creamfields is Live Nation's best festival. And they have some good ones. I put Reading in there, but if you look at the growth pattern of that, what it stands for, it has a really clear identity. The narrative about what Creamfields is very, very clear. And then I think they execute a really great show. If that's what you want to do, and if that's the music you like, why would you go anywhere else? And you can't ask for any more than that. That's that therefore for me is the definition of a successful event. And so I think it's been it's worked out incredibly well for both of them. One would look from the outside anyway.
What do you think AEG's best festival is?
Well, I choose my response very carefully. I mean, Coachella for me is one of the world's best festivals, not just one of AEG's. I've been going to that since 2001, and I went with James. We were still at Cream at that time, and we went by accident. I mean, not by accident, we were invited, but we didn't even know about it. We were in Los Angeles, and we met Paul Talat, and he said, "You should come to my festival. I'm doing this festival out in the desert." And we were like, "Well, where is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's like 3 hours drive away." We were sure we really want to do that. But Paul Oakenfold was playing it, and he was our resident DJ at Cream at the time. So we went with him. And I was blown away by it then, and obviously it's completely different now, but it was like the landscape of it. I'm not sure if any of you have been, but I just find, Coachella Valley and that area, I just find it a real magical space. It's not a word I would use too liberally, but it is, or energy, but there's a reason why it was such a popular or such an important location for Native Americans. And so it's, I just think with the heat, the landscape, it's beautiful, and the light when it comes in, and there's I always feel excited about going. I've been going for over 20 years. So, but the way that Paul and his team execute that show, so much thought goes into it. Every year I go, is the way that everything, the infrastructure changes and the layout. Sorry, the infrastructure rather is the same. So the footprint by that. But you can create your own narrative, which I think is one of the real skills of running a major event. Allowing the fan to create their own narrative about their day out, not forcing something on them. And I think Coachella is one of those shows where it means many different things to many different people, and I think that's a great skill. But the quality of production, the quality of delivery, the quality of service, etc., as well as clearly the lineups, which is the reason why most people go to events, is always best in class. So I think it's hard to look past that. But I'm very passionate about what we do in Hyde Park with BST. I think it's a great show. They're very different shows, and but our team love All Points East. All Points East for us is it's very carefully created musically by our team. There's all of the acts that our team love. They all play All Points East, and there is a real sense of excitement about when we do that show. So it's a bit like asking which is your favourite child, isn't it? Really, they all have different qualities that you love. Yeah.
So going back to Hyde Park, you were obviously a very big part of why it started. So can you tell us what the vision there was for BST Hyde Park?
Yeah, it's a story I've told many times before. I was working with AEG. It was 2012, 2011 actually, I think it was at the time, and been to many shows at Hyde Park, some unbelievably great ones, and the contract opportunity was coming up, and it was just lucky for me really that my boss at that time, who just joined AEG or rejoined AEG, come to Europe, who's our CEO at the moment, Jay Marciano, and he, I just literally didn't bump into him, but got talking to him for the first time in a crowded, noisy pre-party at the Brits in 2011 or 2012. I think it would have been 2012 probably. And in amongst the idle, awkward chit chat with your new CEO you've never spoken to before, he asked a question about what did I feel our company should be doing, what was missing. And I just said, we should be producing the most important events that we can, like we do in North America with Coachella at that time. And the opportunity to do Hyde Park is there, we should go at it. And he said, great, okay, let's get some time together and send me, let's go through some ideas. So I did that and put together the very first deck, which we thought, and it didn't work when I was doing a meeting with him, much to my horror. And he just said, look, just pitch it to me. So I pitched him what the idea is. It was virtually identical to what you see now, and I'd done all the sketches and stuff, how I wanted it to look, and the different zones, and the iconic kind of stage, so it was a very bespoke build, and all about quality. Because the one thing, not here to sort of criticize anybody else, but I always think Hyde Park is one of the best open spaces in the world. I think you have Central Park, and Hyde Park sits there. It goes back to the 60s. Obviously, the Rolling Stones play in there, and all of the great artists who play there. And I just felt it could be better. It should be like the pinnacle of your career should be playing there, but also the pinnacle of your, live music experience of that year should be, do you remember when we went to Hyde Park, how great it was? And that's what you want to try and get across. And that really was all of the idea. And Jay and I, worked on it for probably 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and we got it to the point where, he said, great, I think let's go for it. We put our pitch in and we won it.
Is there anything right now was there anything in the first draft that hasn't made it to the final?
No, we've added things, but the original concept was always to have these different zones. So firstly, from an experiential side of things, but also from a business sense, you want people to be at your event for longer than they are somewhere else. It was used to drive me mad that you'd go to an event, and any event, it can be not just Hyde Park, but any event, and the bars and the restaurants and the hotel lobbies and the pubs, they're all full with people who are going to the show, and you're thinking, why are they not in the show? Why are they in this place? And then they'll go an hour before the headliner comes in, and that's not a very good business approach, to be honest with you. You want them in your place, and you also, the reason for that, obviously, you need to pay for this incredible cost of this infrastructure going in, and ancillaries, be it your bar and your F&B and your merchandise and stuff, is a very, very important part of your P&L. But you also want people to become part of the day. And I mentioned before about people writing their own narrative, not just turning up 45 minutes before Bruce Springsteen goes on, whoever's headlining that, having an amazing experience, but their experience is with him. or with the band or with whatever artist they've come to, not necessarily with the event. And you're trying to change that dynamic where you want them to build an identity or build a relationship rather with the event as well. And then when the mothership arrives, which is Adele walking out or Barbra Streisand or Olivia Rodrigo, whoever it's going to be, it's like, wow, that's the crowning moment of it. But you've had this amazing time leading up to that. And that brings a relationship with the actual event space. So now what we hope we have achieved after this length of time is, because I think most people have quite broad music taste, obviously some people are very narrow with that, but most people, especially in friendship groups, are quite broad. And, I want you to be sending the email out to everybody and going, Olivia Rodrigo's on sale tomorrow. I know it's not your favorite act, but I love her. Let's all go because it's in Hyde Park, because it's amazing. Do you remember we had a great time last year at whatever the show was? And everybody goes, yeah, okay, I'll buy a ticket. It feels like it's good value. And that's what you're really trying to get from an event. Otherwise, it's just a concert in an open space, and I don't feel it's really an event.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's the differentiating factor between AEG's live shows and other festivals?
Well, I'd say it's a defining feature of ours. I wouldn't want to say it's not a defining feature of others, because I don't run their shows, and they'll perhaps sit here and say exactly the same thing. I actually don't go to many of their shows as well, to be fair, because when you're so busy, you get a Saturday off. Sometimes you don't want to go to someone else's show either. So it would be unfair to say, but it's certainly a defining feature of, and certainly strategy of how we set things up. There has to be a meaning as why we're doing this. I say that to everybody who works with me, or any of these times I sit down with younger people and talk about the industry. It's like, why are we doing this? Like so many times earlier, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was producing a lot of shows for other people, and you meet people and they go, I really want to do an event, or they had a club night or a small event and they wanted to do a big one, and it was you kind of like, apart from just thinking you're going to make a load of money, which you're probably not, by the way, certainly for a number of years. Why do you want to do this? What's different about it? What is it actually saying? It needs to have, the event itself needs to have a reason to be there. And otherwise it's just a series of tents or a series of stages in a field. It might as well be one of 50. And there's that homogenous, I hate that kind of approach to it. The one thing I'd say about every event is different with AEG. I think there's a lot of other events where you could walk into any one of 20, and after 2 drinks, whatever your limit is, you might think you're at the other one because it looks the same and feels the same and sounds the same. And I think that's a really bad thing. I think it's a bad thing for the industry. When you have a lack of creativity or a lack of difference between, the different offerings for fans, I think it's bad for the industry. Things should stick out and be unique, to interest people to engage with the live music industry, because there are so many other things people can spend their money on. And if we don't serve up a great experience, it's on us. You can't blame the fans for not going to a festival, or not going to a club, or not going to a theatre show, or even an arena. If the offering and the service isn't up to scratch, why should people buy a ticket? They're expensive.
Mm-hmm. What do you think your biggest challenges have been in putting up a festival?
Well, London's, I think, probably the most, not even probably, but I think it is the most competitive market in the world. Los Angeles is as well, California is a state, but I think it's hard to think of another market where there are so many shows that take place. Because we don't have major sports teams as well, like a lot of, obviously, in the States, our arenas, are packed with music shows. There's a very high show count in our venues. And there are less shows to go around now. There's less, people are, especially from the US, for a bunch of reasons, but we are beginning to see artists tour less in certain markets. Mm-hmm. Touring is very, very strong at the moment. The show count is particularly high, but what you can see on most tours is that you get a lot of artists. They'll play fewer markets. They may play the same amount of shows, but they maybe play. Say they come to the UK and play 6 shows, they'll just do 2 markets. They won't go to 6 cities, they'll go to 2 and do multiples, etc. Touring is very, very expensive for the artists. It's very expensive for the promoter to put the shows on as well. And the cost of actually traveling into Europe as well for a lot of artists is difficult. And the American or North American concert market, touring market, is extremely strong. And the difference on ticketing, pricing in North America versus other markets means that the revenue which an artist can create by staying in North America has never been stronger. Whether it's peaked or not, I don't know. We can obviously speculate about that. But there are such high revenues by staying in North America, such high costs to leave North America to come into other markets to earn less money. The appeal of it becomes like, okay, how do we make it work better? And sometimes that leads to them playing less cities, less markets.
Mm-hmm. So for the festivals, do you reach out to the artists, or do the artists reach out to you?
It's more us. I think it's almost a constant dialogue though with artist representation. Their agents or their managers, usually their agents for us. So it's a very vibrant and dynamic marketplace, if we want to call it that, in terms of talent buying for festivals. So it's very dynamic on both sides. So you have all of the major agencies and the independent ones who will be looking to present the best possible routings for their artists for any particular window in the summer. So, and they'll be speculating for the large part as well. So what you have is a major agency, bunch of huge clients, huge artists, headliners, and their manager will have asked for, or they will be presenting to their manager, a number of options. If you can come in June, we've got 12 shows and this amount of money. You can come in August, it's 10 shows, it's this amount of money, whatever. And then the manager and the different agents, because they could have different representation in North America versus Europe, will work it out or compete in some way, which market's going to get the artist in which window. And so, because the festival market in the US is pretty developed as well. So it depends if they want to stay in to do the Coachella leading into the early part of the summer, and then they'll come to Europe for the back end of the summer, or the other way around. So all of that will take place over many, many months. And then the artists will usually lock the window which they're going to take. And then we get into the real heavy negotiation, if you like, of whether they're going to play our show in that window or they're going to play the competing show in that window.
Okay.
That's the hard bit.
Are there any artists that you haven't booked yet but would like to?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've been doing this a long time now, so I'm very fortunate to be able to work on a lot of great shows, which obviously have high appeal for artists wanting to play. So that obviously helps. Wasn't always the case though. Most people who do what I do, we all started out as independents. Like I said, me booking Creamfields all those years ago, very difficult to book artists against the big festivals at that time. So I we all come from that world. We understand how hard it is. But I missed out on some, mostly because they're sadly not with us. So I have huge, not regrets, that's too strong a word, but I would have loved to have had David Bowie play, Prince, George Michael, all sadly no longer with us. And, we used to make offers for, I think I used to make an offer for Prince every 4 times a year, sometimes 5. I know you said no 4 times, but would you consider the 5th? So, it's everybody has a list. The promoter always has a list. The one, especially this one, which is the one you really want to do, and you kind of get through that. You get disappointed every single year because they're not touring anymore, and you get down to the reality of what's actually available, and then you just got to book the best possible lineups that you can, and the best supporting packages. And that's one thing I think we do spend a lot of time on. It's not just that, we don't see any of our shows as concerts. They're not, they're festivals. We want people to arrive at 2:00, trusting us. The first act on that main stage at 3:00, they may have never heard of them, but we want them to trust us and the headline artist who's playing, who we have been consulting with about the rest of the bill, that this is an important act, you should come. Don't be in the pub across the street, have a drink here and listen to this and see this new great artist. So That process can take a while.
Mhm. So going back to what you said about when you were working for Cream and it was hard to get artists because most festivals were taking them up. How do you feel about people saying that right now?
About us? Yeah, the other way around. I mean, it's a very good point. I mean, we try and be sensible. I mean, there are some major companies who are, I understand the reasoning as well because it's hugely expensive to book artists, and so the risk and I mentioned at the start that the barriers to entry and the risk profile of being in this for an independent is unbelievable. It's great, why people would start a festival now. I mean, it's very, very risky. At the same time, for a major event, it's still risky. Just because it's a big company doesn't mean, it's okay if you lose a load of money. Trust me, that's not the case. So things like exclusivity are very, very, contentious issues because the independent and the smaller festivals can feel they're excluded from being able to participate in acquiring those artists. I can see it both sides because if you're being asked to pay multi-millions of dollars for an act, you don't want them to play down the road. Do you know what I mean? That's no different if Mbappe comes and plays, for a Premier League team, he's going to play for one. He's not going to play every other week. I go and play across the street for the other guys. So there is an exclusivity which naturally comes just purely because of the value of the contract that's there. But that said, it should be lowered down when you go down the bill. That's where it doesn't work out for me. And I think we're pretty loose on that. I think we're fair with it. We don't take, like really big exclusivities on smaller acts. We let them go and play other shows. We'll want to make sure we have things like announcements. That we want them to announce on our show first, and then they can announce on other shows. So we try and be supportive of that. But it's difficult at the top end, just purely because you're paying so much money for that act.
Mm-hmm. So, how do the sponsors work at the festivals?
Well, look, I mean, all partners are really, it's part of the process, and picking the right ones is the most important thing. I always have a simple rule is with our global partnerships teams who run all of our sponsorship, both from sales and then the management side of it, is there should be a reason why anyone's there, and a sponsor should be the same as that. So what value are they adding to the fan? What value are they adding to the artist from their presence? Obviously, we get a check, okay, to put it bluntly, and that helps us. But then, what are we using that for? So if we look at American Express, obviously is our headline sponsor of BST Hyde Park. They are, I think, one of the best, in what they do because they are very, very targeted about how they want to add value to fans at that show. So they spend and invest a lot of money in their experiential activations on site. Like I'm not sure if any of you have been to Hyde Park, but there's a huge Amex lounge there. We can go and get a load of stuff, and they add a load of value. It's so popular. This is one of the things I think some people, sometimes go, it's too many sponsors and stuff like that, and you kind of, but look at the queue for people to get into it. They're offering value to fans, and fans are, embracing it and engaging with it. And why should we have a problem with it? I don't. And I think they do some great things with artists, with exclusive merch items and stuff, which things that fans want. They run a really great pre-sale for their customers as well, which gives a lot of other enhancements, obviously to their card members. But they're all value adds. I don't think they're intrusive. I think they allow fans to still have their moment directly with the reason why they're really there, which is the headline artist. Not all sponsors do that. Some of them want to be everywhere, and it's kind of like I've added all the logos up, and there's only 9,643, and there should be 9,645, and it's and it shouldn't be about that. It should be about the value that people add.
How do you view the boycotts?
Well, it's a really interesting subject, a very important one as well. And obviously, there's been a number of issues, if you like, in the last 12 months where this has come to a very prominent position in the UK industry. And I think we have to be respectful on both sides. If a company is acting responsibly and within the law, then it's for people to choose whether or not they agree with that company's policies. And if they don't, then that's fine. I have no problem with that. I think that the counter to that is that the position against the company, I have no problem with hearing about it. It should be balanced, accurate, and detailed. And I think then people can make their own minds up from that. I think we're dealing with some very emotive issues in a cultural industry as well, and we talked about sponsorship and partnerships. There's many shows, you talk about the independent sector as well. The sponsorship and partnership revenue which comes into, especially into the independent sector, is one of the most important revenue streams that's there. And so we have to be careful how far some of those arguments are pushed against so many companies. At the same time, the approach which our industry takes to embracing partners and sponsors should be done through very careful audits. What do these brands stand for? Do they align with us? Do they align with the principles of our industry? Do they align with the principles of our fans? And even though they may fit in they're doing nothing wrong legally or et cetera, we should still take decisions which align with our fans as well. Now, I think that's on a case-by-case basis. Okay, I don't think we can just come out with a blanket decision from that, because I think it's too nuanced. And we have certain shows which we run, especially with partners, where we have a much, not just because of this, some of these issues which we're facing at the moment, but just generally as an approach to brands coming into the environment, a cultural environment. And it doesn't suit that particular show for us to do that. So regardless of what the brand is, a decision is taken more times out than not to not have the brand, regardless of who it is, because we don't think it suits the event and we don't think it suits the ideals of the music fans who are coming to that. So it's a very difficult, and I don't think it's a one size fits all argument or response. I think it has to be looked at on an individual case by case basis.
Do you also see ticketing as an issue?
Well, I mean, it's a big challenge. I think, we could sit here for a week talking about ticketing. I think, if we break it down to secondary, I think, and then there's dynamic, and then there's probably just pricing, which covers all of those. I think the issue with secondary, and I'm probably going back 10 years now in terms of the development of that argument, is that money has been leaving the industry. So fans have been paying money for tickets at highly elevated prices in some cases, or just just in a fan-to-fan fashion. But that money then it leaves the industry. The artist doesn't see it, the suppliers don't see it, the venue doesn't see it, performing rights societies don't see it, which means the writers of the music, etc. So the whole ecosystem of the live music industry does not benefit from that revenue, and that's not right. Okay, in my opinion, I don't think that's right. I think it's very hard to legislate that if you bought 2 tickets and you can't go, that you can't then sell those to your friend over there. And I don't think that's right either, to prevent people from doing that. I think where we've landed with what I would see as a more balanced model through the main ticketing companies, where you can sell that ticket for an agreed uplift. Most of these, it's 10% uplift over it, so you have the ability and the flexibility to move that ticket around. I don't think that's an exploitative amount to put 10% on the ticket price. Ultimately, you maybe sat online for 3 hours trying to get the ticket in the first place. I think that allows that process and the movement of ticket inventory to actually take place from fans to fans. So I think, by and large, that system works better than it's ever worked. Okay. Dynamic pricing is a different, and obviously that's been in the news, obviously for the recent tours you've seen, Oasis being the one which I think you're probably referring to. I think, look, what I would say on this, on any level of pricing, is about visibility. And I'm not calling that tour out, I'm not calling anyone. I think if you can see what you're paying for, then if you don't like the price, don't pay for it. But I think visibility is the key. And that's no different from walking into a restaurant or a clothes shop or buying a music ticket. You should see what the price is of what you're paying for. And that's all I would probably add to that argument. Overall on pricing, I think we worry about pricing too much. I'm not saying, I'll qualify that now, I think it's about value. I think it's the value point, not the price point. If something is really great and it's really high value and you can see that a lot of money went into producing it, then I think the price is not irrelevant because you've still got to find the money and you've still got to pay for it. But you're accepting the point that you could see where the value of that is, and you're going to a show and you're going to a Taylor Swift concert and you're going, oh my God, I've never seen production like this. This has just blew my mind. The value, the price of the ticket against the value of what you've done is at that point, I think, fair. And I think, that's an example which I think should come into more than, the price of the ticket was just this. Well, how good was it? It's like saying, one car shouldn't be more expensive than another. If you sit in it, it's like you can see it's cost a lot of money to make it. It's really luxurious, and it drives amazingly, and you feel like I'm going to keep this memory of driving this forever. Then you shouldn't go, well, it's just more expensive than the other one. It's a better car. And I think that's the same with concerts and festivals. If you come back from Glastonbury or Coachella, hopefully Hyde Park, at that point, and you mention the price afterwards to us, then we've failed at that point, because you should be talking about the show. What a great time you had. If you come away going, can't believe that cost me 65 quid or 95 pounds or even more, or whatever it would be, then we failed on the delivery point. And so I think it's like I always try and flip it the other way, because I think promoters and artists, who set prices together, it's you've got no right not to be called out on the pricing of your event or your concert if you've not delivered against it.
Do the artists have any say in the festival tickets, the prices?
No, not particularly on festivals. I mean, Hyde Park is more of a hybrid, really, because it's a festival, but it's not camping. It's obviously a series of shows, and but it's 3 stages, 20 artists, etc. So from a experience side of things, it's very much a festival. But because it's our event, obviously we run the budget, we understand the costings of that. It becomes a consultative process with the headliner who's playing. Mostly because we just don't want to get it wrong. What you want is a very supportive relationship with the artists who are playing any of your shows, to know that that we've got it right. At the end of the day, we're trying to manage the relationship between the event, the artist who are playing, and the fans. You've got to get that right on everything from experience, the lineup that's playing, ticket pricing, the whole hit.
Has there ever been a case where an artist has asked for something that doesn't fit with maybe either your vision or just logistics?
Not really. I mean, what we try. I mean, BST was set up. One of the we said about what does it stand for, and all these other. But it's set up to be and to encourage and to never say no to what an act wants to do. We want the show. That going back to the experience before. I don't want half of what they may have done at Wembley Stadium last time. We want everything. We want a bit more out of it. So from that side of things, we're actually quite encouraging for them to go beyond. We have the biggest screen, I think, probably until Adele's recent one in Munich, but the biggest LED wrap screen that you see. It's like 1,100 square meters. So, they are encouraged then to provide the most amazing visuals, because it's on them really. You've got this huge screen that you've got to use it, and most of them will do that. So it's very much a case we want to encourage them to actually go beyond on the production side of things. obviously some occasional asks which are just practically impossible. I think by and large we usually align with artists as well on support bills. Some artists are, from our side, I think we will always encourage because we want a full day of it. We want to make sure that the artist fans can connect with as much of the bill as possible, even if they've not heard of them before. If they'll listen to them, they'll connect, or they'll go and find out about the artist. Sometimes artists will want to book something completely different, just because they're friends or they hung out with them or they're fans of their music, and you get that a lot. And you have to respect that, the artist has got musical taste, that, inspirations or whatever it would be that they want to bring to the show as well. But we might say, yeah, but the fans, you love that act, but that's not going to necessarily work for your audience who are coming to see you, and acts that are probably more aligned with you than perhaps, some of your choices for the support bill. So it's quite rare that happens, to be honest with you.
Talking about the support bill and the artists maybe lower down on the bill, how do you support those artists? Because obviously, I'm sure you have great support for headliners, but how do you make sure that grassroots acts and just younger artists in general are being involved?
Well, yeah, I think one of the most important things is giving them opportunities. So on any show that we do, we have a number of smaller stages, and the smaller stages for many acts is their entry point into the festival circuit, if you like. So that's, I think, one of the best things that we can give is the opportunity for young artists to be able to perform on major events, experience it, play in front of larger numbers of people. So an act can play at Hyde Park, and one of the smaller stages is still play in front of thousands of people. Okay, and that at this point in their career, they might be selling 50 tickets or 100 tickets or maybe 500 tickets. So there's ability for them, and then you're kind of giving them, the baton to go and run and do what they can do with that opportunity after, because we don't manage them. And what we see now, and you see there's some really smart, young people in the industry, some really smart young managers, and are so good on social media and how they work that opportunity. And they'll not just play and say, oh, we're playing BST Hyde Park next week and that's the end of it. They'll work the opportunity. They're really good with content. They're really good at sharing content in the right way. Even the basics of just tagging themselves to the other artists who are playing stuff, and just building up that network, if you like, and connectivity amongst different artists and the fan groups, and just building the reach of what that performance actually gave them. And you see there's some really smart young managers out there who are brilliant at doing that with their artists. And so it's kind of like giving them that platform to then go and, develop themselves.
I'm taking up way too much time.
I'm
I
okay.
don't think what to ask. Okay. If you had unlimited resources, what would you want your festival to look like, or do you think it would look the same?
Well, there's still a few sketches from 12 years ago which I haven't, managed to get built yet. But for me, I think from an artist's perspective, we're very fortunate. I don't think there's a particular barrier to any artist coming in to play Hyde Park, All Points East, Rock on Seine, any of the shows that we do. And obviously we book in accordance with those budgets and the look and feel of those shows. So from an artist's perspective, there's plenty of people who don't want to play in that environment. I have to respect that, but it's not many. I think from a service delivery point of view, I think BST is high. There's not much more we can do because we're restricted by the amount of space. It's not like I can just go to the Royal Parks. Can you give me another, 10 acres next to it, please? So we're kind of like there are natural limitations with that, and we're running 9 shows now across 3 weekends. So I think it's the maximum of any festival run, which I think would be in existence. I mean, there's certainly some infrastructure pieces I'd like to put in, but it's pretty expensive to do that. So if it was unlimited, I'd upgrade some of the spaces, but there's not many. I mean, we set up, like I say, the different zones all those years ago, and some of them developed and some still sit as they are. Like the carnival space for us is, it's still exactly the same buildings, it's like a film set that we've built there, and they're still the same ones from 12 years ago. I don't ever want to change them. For me, they're as important as the Great Oak Stage, which we have, which we've upgraded, and it's a bigger stage now and what have you. But there's certain pieces in there which I think are just the fabric of what we created there. People go there and they go, I'll meet you at the Carnival space, and we'll watch the Cuban Brothers on that stage, and we'll watch that, and meet there at 4 o'clock and stuff. And that's the sort of thing you want people to have, that kind of connectivity with different parts of the festival. But unlimited resource. There's people in my company that probably say I already have that, so I'm already spoiled a little bit on budget. But yeah.
I have one last question, and we'll open it up. Do you have any advice for young people wanting to get into the music industry?
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and I think it's very different. Like I said, when we started out, I started out doing a part in the late 80s, selling tickets at school. So, it was as lo-fi as you can get at that point. I still, have a passion for this industry, that is still an entry point which anybody can do. If you're passionate about music and passionate about being part of the live music industry, those opportunities do exist, okay, and you should chase those. And be bold. We were fearless, and I don't mean that in a negative sense that we were crazy about it, or did silly things. I mean, we probably did some silly things actually, but we could get away with it back in the early 90s. But we were fearless. We would just go at it. We think this will work. We had no fear of failure, which was we didn't want to fail. It wasn't like it was our money, by the way, as well. Independence, and we got it wrong, it hurt. And we've got a few wrong, by the way. I'm probably still paying a few of them back. And but you had the ability to do that then, and that's not there now. So I think I would advise any young person coming into it just to be follow their passions, stick to them, their goals, if you like, in terms of what they want to achieve from that. Be responsible. You get it wrong now, and it can wipe you out. So I think I would just say be cautious with how much risk you take, because a lot of times it doesn't work, okay? But give yourself a chance to go at it again, and go at it again, and go at it again until it does. So I think, but anything anybody does, especially in the live music space, it should stand for something. If you can look at it and honestly reflect back and go, that doesn't stand out from what anyone else is doing, don't do it. Because if you think that, so does everybody else, probably. If you can identify what you do in a very short sentence with key narratives about this is why this event is a great event, then you're halfway there. But if you can't do that, start again.
Okay. Any questions?
Blocks.
Yeah.
How do you foresee festivals evolving in the coming years?